I am here today with the one and only freelance writer du jour, Molly O'Brien, coming to us from Denver, Colorado. And she is going to delight and inspire us today with press trip do's and don'ts in 2025. So, without further ado, Molly, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Molly. I am a freelance writer who's been working in the industry for about 5 years now. I got my start out of a tricky situation during COVID, but we can dive more into that later. Um, I've lived in Massachusetts, California, and now I'm based in Denver. So a little bit of across America, and I love telling stories about people and places. So I'm excited to speak with you, Autumn.
Yes, thank you. We're excited to speak with you as well. And by we, it's just me. Okay, so real quick, before we dive into press trips, let's start at the beginning with the press trip invitation. Um, First, do you have a preference towards solo or group fans and why?
That's a great question. I think that it depends on the situation. So I think there are certain trips that are best off as group trips, um, because the networking opportunities are fantastic and the way that you can interact with the destination is best done as a group. And there are some destinations that I personally wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with visiting by myself. Um, I gotta say, most of the trips that I do are solo trips just because they're a lot easier to fit into my schedule and they're a lot easier to align with my interests and my ability to tell stories. So, yes, I believe that it depends on the situation, but both are great when it comes to opportunities to work together.
Yeah, of course. And what do you tend to like to see when you get that first email invitation? Like any tips for people writing those invitation emails?
Yeah, that's a great question too. All of your questions are great, so it's silly for me to keep saying that. But I think that one of the most important details of a press trip invitation is the dates, because a lot of times, I don't want to speak for other journalists, but for me personally, I know right away whether or not I can't make it on the trip if it's during a set of dates that I already have another trip, whether it's personal or professional. So the dates are very important up front. It might even help to have them in the subject line if possible, and then where the trip is important too. It sounds silly to say, but there are plenty of emails that I get that have pitches, and the pitches are beautiful, but it doesn't necessarily say within the first few sentences or even a couple of paragraphs where this trip is, which is an important element when it comes to that storytelling.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
And how about timing? Like, is there such a thing as sending an invite too early, too far in advance, or would you prefer that?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think when it comes to those individual trips, it's never too early. I'm talking to Banff right now, the public relations person for Banff in Canada, about a trip next January. So that's not close at all. But I don't have any commitments yet in January of 2026. So it's easy to work around that. I think that it depends. For me personally, there wouldn't be necessarily be a certain sweet spot because I could be free 3 weeks from now and the trip might just happen to work out, and it doesn't it needs to be something that I can turn into a story. I know I keep saying that, but if it's somewhere that it's like travel to Dubai in 3 weeks, that's a lot more challenging than travel to Vail, Colorado in 3 weeks, which is about an hour and a half away from where I live.
Yeah, totally. And in that initial invite email, I know on the PR side, what we're usually struggling with the push and pull for our own clients is having enough information up front versus like, what we can tease just so that we can put a placeholder on your calendar. So, how do you feel about getting sort of that tease email as opposed to like, here's a pretty good, full itinerary of what you can expect?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I should have said in my intro that I started off my career in public relations. So I've been on that side of building lists and trying to send out invites and coordinate dates with people. And I know what it feels like to send an invite to 50 people and get three responses and they're all no. So it can be really tricky. to just gauge interest and a response in general sometimes, and I understand that. But I feel like when it comes to the itinerary, I know that things aren't always set in stone. I feel like it would be a good idea to provide a general idea of what you could be doing, because for me, that helps me send out potential feelers to the editors I work with in terms of gauging their interest in stories, which is what we're all working towards, is confirmed coverage eventually. So just an idea of what you could be doing is really important. And if it doesn't end up working out, communication is really key in terms of setting those expectations of like, we were supposed to go to this destination to do this thing, but it ended up not working out. So we're going to replace it with this instead, just whenever you know. But yeah, patience is something that you have to have when it comes to traveling in general, whether it's for work or personal trips. And setting those expectations and communicating, I think, is the most important thing when it comes to any kind of trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you feel about personalizing a media itinerary, even though it's on a group fam trip? So of course, for individual trips, they're going to be, as tailored as humanly possible to the individual. But with a group, you know, on the PR side, we often hear, don't have all the same type of writers, like with all the same beats or very similar publications they all contribute to all on the same trip, because then they feel like they go away all with the same ideas too. So, whether it's having a diverse group of journalists or having like just, kind of slightly more individualized itineraries even on a group trip, how do you feel about that? Would you feel like, oh, but like then we're not all together all the time? Or would you like that?
Yeah, I think it could go either way. Honestly, that sounds like a lot more work for you as the public relations person to be organizing five separate itineraries for different journalists. For me, I found that the best balance has been if it's a trip where, if it's a group trip, you're together for some of them and you have your own opportunities during other times of the trip. So if you all meet for dinner at night, because again, that's why I go on group trips, is to be able to network with people and have those personal connections. So if I'm going to be in a group, it's nice to have that group time at some points, but it is really nice for me personally. I like having my mornings a little bit less blocked out, because I like being able to work in the morning. That's when my brain works the best on writing, at least, and pitching. So maybe having a conversation about what would work for each journalist. I've had like, when you send out media forums, and it sometimes it'll have like, when it's a, they don't ask when you do your best work and vice versa, but they ask like what you might be interested in, and then you can work around those kinds of, these many people are interested in this and these many people are interested in this, and then you have to worry about making a dinner reservation at a certain time anyway, and then working around it in that way.
Yeah, totally. All right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I get it. Like I get that. It's like it's kind of like, why would you go on a group press trip if you're never going to see the group, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to have. I feel like my best experiences when it comes to group trips that you have your own activities is that first night you have something all together. So then you all at least meet each other. I was on a press trip recently where it was a hotel opening in Breckenridge, and it was just me and my husband, and actually our dog Fuji got to come too, which was very exciting. But we all had something together on that first night, and we all met each other at dinner, and we were able to connect and socialize and network, and that was wonderful. But then for the next day, we each had our own activities that we were doing. Connor and I went skiing, and a couple of the journalists that don't do snow sports went in out. They made hats, custom hats in downtown Breckenridge, which was super neat. And so I think that different people having those different interests is important, and being able to pitch the right opportunities for them as well.
Yeah, totally. I get that. And okay, so last kind of quick question around the invitation stage of press trips. It could be more so for an event that's like around the corner from you. It doesn't have to be necessarily a huge press trip destination, but I am curious if it's local-ish or if it's not. Is something like an Uber or Lyft credit a big factor towards getting you to attend an event, and similarly guests being allowed to bring a plus one?
Yeah. The first part of that question, when it comes to Uber and Lyft credits, I feel like when you live in a big city or somewhere that you don't have a car, it helps a lot. Like New York City and Los Angeles, it was so embarrassing when I would get to an event late because I was looking for parking, and it would be even more frustrating when I ended up paying $50 for that parking spot. Um, and traffic and all of those headaches. But when it comes to certain destinations, it might be easier to drive yourself. So factoring in where it's taking place, and then just in terms of your own budget, I know it can be frustrating if you send an Uber credit to a journalist and they don't end up using it. So just I guess it goes back to, it sounds cliche, but the communication of what that journalist might need. But I know then that there can create conflict because then they might find out that some journalists got a credit and others didn't. So just being transparent in how maybe there's the option if you need it, but you don't necessarily have to have it just put into your account if you don't.
Hmm.
And then when it comes to traveling either solo or with someone else, for me personally, I really appreciate being able to have someone traveling with me, whether it's my mom or my dad or my husband, just because I feel like I don't usually solo travel. So it's nice to have someone there with me to be able to share those experiences with in a way that I would be if I were just traveling for leisure. And if you're a solo traveler, then that's fantastic. And that's a totally different way of exploring. But it's also just nice to have someone when things go wrong. Like things go wrong all the time when you're traveling, again, whether it's for business or pleasure. And when my flight is delayed and I'm stuck in a state that I don't live in, it's nice when I'm with my husband or my mom instead of just stuck there by myself.
Yeah, totally. And that's a great point that like for a lot of people it's their beat that they're a solo traveler or that that's what they write about. So that's a good point. It's like if it's not necessarily your beat, it feels, not always necessary to travel
Yeah,
alone.
it's not as natural. And to be honest, I feel like I don't mind covering the expenses for my husband when it comes to like, I don't expect any PR person to buy his flights anywhere. That's really generous if they do, but I don't expect it. And same when it comes to food and stuff. When it comes to hotel rooms, I've rarely encountered a hotel room that charges more if you have an extra person. So again, even if I have to cover those extra costs or if I get a media rate for him to do an activity, that's much appreciated because I don't oftentimes travel by myself, and it's nice to have someone with you to be able to go through it with.
Yeah, totally. All right. Let's start with the juicy stuff. Start with the bad. So, press trips. Either you can tell us about the worst press trip you've ever been on, don't have to name names necessarily, or just what made it the worst, some of the very big no's and don'ts in your mind from experience.
Yeah, I think that the I was thinking about this earlier. The worst experience that comes to my mind, and again, it goes back to communication. Connor and I were on our red eye to the East Coast, and we were supposed to meet with this public relations person who represented the destination for coffee after we landed at like 8 in the morning, 7:30, 8 in the morning. So we land in Charlotte or Raleigh or wherever we landed, and we got there, and it was a red eye, so it sucked because we came from Los Angeles all the way to the East Coast. And we got to the coffee shop and the person wasn't there. And they weren't answering my phone calls. And I emailed them and I didn't hear back from them until that afternoon. And they were like, sorry, I couldn't make it, blah, blah, blah. And they had an excuse. And I was like, lady, I just flew across the country and I'm in your destination. And you didn't even let me know that you couldn't make it beforehand. And I didn't have a car. So I think we had like Ubered to that coffee shop when we were just sitting there for however long waiting and hoping that this person was going to show up. So that was not a great way to start the trip. And then it just turned into a total mess from there in that specific city where they like the hotel was expecting me to pay up front with my credit card, and usually public relations people take care of that stuff beforehand. And I was like, it's fine if I have to pay for it and then I get reimbursed, but that should have been communicated beforehand. So that was really frustrating because it's hard to drop like hundreds of dollars on a hotel that you're not expecting right in the moment. um, and then they didn't reimburse me, so I had to go back to the agency that had organized this trip, and the agency ended up reimbursing me. They cut me a check, and they probably just billed that client whenever they billed them for that month as part of the retainer. So yeah, the person not showing up, and then me having to pay for my own hotel, and then them never paying me back and having to get paid back by their agency was a pretty crappy experience. And I won't name names because I know for a fact that that person doesn't work for that destination anymore, which says that it didn't work out in terms of the professionalism. So they don't need to be bashed any more than they already were by losing that position. But it was a very negative experience. And it didn't impact my experience in the destination at all. It just left a very bad taste in my mouth when it came to like the time that I took and the effort and the energy to go there. And it just was it was disappointing, I guess. The
Yeah, totally.
rest of the trip was lovely. And the agency that organized the trip did a wonderful job. It was just the in-house PR person for this destination that dropped the ball, and it was disappointing.
Yeah, totally. And actually, you brought up a very divisive topic in the destination PR world, which is reimbursements. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, how big of a deterrent is that process? Like, I don't know if you kind of keep in the back of your mind, like, oh, that agency has that process, or like that destination has that process. Like, you know,
That's a really good question. I think something that frustrates me most is when I have to fill out tax forms to get reimbursed. And I'm sure other freelance journalists have told you that and can empathize. I don't care how I get paid back. Personally, I'm very, very lucky to be in a situation where I'm not living paycheck to paycheck, but I understand some people are, and that's out of their control. Um, I've had people pay me back on Venmo moments after I buy my own flight. I've had people give me literally $1,000 worth of gift cards in an envelope when I get to the destination because that's how they're able to work with the rules that they have. I know a lot of agencies and destinations aren't allowed to rent cars for journalists, so I have to pay for it and then I'm reimbursed. It can be hard when I don't get paid until like 45 days later because they're on a net 30-day or 45-day schedule or whatever. But as long as the communication is good throughout that process, I don't really care how I get paid back. It's just, it's nice to be able to.
yeah. First rule, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I know the tax stuff especially is really challenging because it's like it's not income, it's a
Yeah.
reimbursement. So like yeah, ever since I kind of found out all of that, several years back earlier in my career, I was just every client I ever work with, I beg and plead. I'm like, you have to find a loophole.
Yeah.
A lot of the time it's government clients, so of course that's the
Right.
big thing. That's the huge hurdle is like
Yeah.
usually with government clients. So yeah, anywhere, anytime you can get a gift card or a Venmo or something, it's I'm sure a huge coup.
And you bring up a great point about how complicated it is. And I think most seasoned travel journalists understand that and they are patient about it. So when it comes to different types of clients, I mean, I when I worked in PR, I worked with Visit California, and in order to host a journalist, they had to visit 3 different counties within the state. So that is, I mean, I get that, but it could be tricky for an individual journalist to be able to take the time to visit 3 different counties during their visit. And sometimes you had to get creative, but it's always the government clients that are a little bit because of the budgeting. You're completely right.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Okay. Well, let's go on the do's, the good ones. Tell us either about the press trip, the great press trip you've been on, or just, what made it great, what made it the best.
Yeah, I love that we're finishing on like the more positive note when it comes to all of that. I think what makes a press trip really enjoyable, despite the destination, because I know that we're lucky enough to work with a lot of beautiful destinations. To me, it's the vibes of the people on the trip. If everyone's getting along, then in general, it's a lot more enjoyable of an experience. So I think that goes back to making sure that you have a good relationship with the journalists that you're hosting. Even if you've never met them before, it's just nice to have a conversation beforehand to get to know them. Like, I don't know, I live with my husband and my dog in Denver, Colorado, and I don't have any kids. And it's just those basic informational facts that are good to know before you connect with someone in person. And then you can't always control this, but sometimes you can, knowing from experience, certain personalities just don't get along, and that's okay. I mean, if you're going to go on like a bachelorette trip, there's probably going to be one out of the 12 girls you're with that you don't vibe with super well, and that's okay. But if you can control it to a certain degree as a public relations person inviting a group of journalists, and if there's only 4 or 5 of you, then it might be good to figure out whether or not those people and you and whoever else is hosting the trip have a similar personality and um, vibes and expectations of what could happen.
Yeah, totally. Actually, you bring up another funny thing. Sometimes when I'm inviting people to an event or a group press trip, um, certain journalists will say, "Do you mind if I ask who else is going? Like who else is confirmed to go on this trip?" And I know it's because it's a small world, and you know if they
Yeah.
see a friend of theirs is also going, that can be a huge boost to getting a yes or an RSVP, you know. And it's just fun too when people know each other, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes the trip more authentic. That goes back to like traveling in a pair or solo. If you have people that you get along with, then I think it just makes it a lot more of a positive experience, Autumn. And like then you're going to have more good ideas out of the trip and you're going to be more motivated to tell a story that people are going to want to read and follow along with.
Yeah. So what else about a press trip in your mind, just thinking back to all the good press trips you've been on where, you know, not everything maybe goes perfectly because it rarely does, but where almost everything went pretty perfectly. Any other, you know, things that stuck out in your mind, characteristics that made it so great?
I think particularly for me, characteristics that make a trip really enjoyable are good organization and communication and transparency, but a little bit of hands-offness when it comes to being able to appreciate the experiences on your own. So I've been on trips where the public relations person is with us from 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. And that's exhausting to have to be on your best behavior for that long. But it was also one of the most rich experiences or which trips I've ever had experience wise. So finding that balance. And I mean, it sounds so funny to say that you remember just inherently as a human, you remember the things that go wrong more than you remember the things that go perfectly. So I have all sorts of stories about how I've tried to check into hotels and they're like, oh, your reservation was last month. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. I'm here now. I am like in the middle of nowhere and I flew here and I need somewhere to sleep. And luckily in those instances, it has been the situation where like the public relations person is with me. So we can take care of it right away. But I've had car rentals too, where like I show up and they're like, we don't have your car right now. And I'm like, well, I don't live here. I don't know what to do. How do I get around? And it's just it makes you more like creative as a person, I guess. And you have to try to figure it out, which again, that's what you would have to be doing if you were a travel or on your own. Um, I mean, it's nice to have public relations people to be connected with and to rely on outlining your trip and all of that. But then to a certain degree, it's like nothing is ever going to be perfect. And you have to be prepared for figuring things out yourself sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
I love
Now,
a farm with a view. I have to say, I think that that's something that makes a trip especially exceptional for me is when I get to the hotel room and I'm like, I could just sit here all day and look out the window because it's that beautiful. So that's something that for me, I think makes a trip feel exceptionally special is having those kinds of rooms that I might not necessarily be able to afford on my own on a personal trip, just looking out onto the mountain or looking out onto the beach or whatever, wherever I am. It just makes it feel really special.
yeah, yeah, that's a good extra little tip for everyone too, because, you know, it's it's the little things that you might not even think about, but you know, if you work with a hotel client, I mean, there's always going to be kind of the room in your mind that you're like, put them in that room. Like that's the best
Yeah.
room, or like that has the best view, you know, or the best amenities, like whatever it is, presidential suite or not, like, you know, it's really easy to just kind of earmark those things. But to your point, if you don't have a hotel client but you're hosting media, good thing to remember and think about.
Yeah, and when it comes to coverage too, I'm not an influencer. My Instagram followership is not high, but you're probably going to get a post out of it if it's something that I'm able to take a picture of, as opposed to like sleeping underground with a little window that lets in a little bit of sunlight. That's not exactly picture worthy.
Yeah, no, that added value coverage on social is certainly helpful, especially if you're a particularly savvy destination. You will be monitoring that and repost it. So again, Another little tip out there for the world. All right. This is the part clients are most concerned with, coverage.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the media landscape right now? Just we're in April 2025. Is confirmed coverage a myth? Is, what's going on with that? I know, of course, some places are more strict than others. Some clients are more strict than others when it comes to like, no, we need confirmed coverage beforehand, or no, just at least an idea of what you're gonna pitch, yada yada yada.
Yeah. I think I'm very honest when it comes to whether or not I mean, going way back, it's impossible in the way that I've written stories before from trips that have gotten killed because my editor got let go. And then there's just absolutely nothing that anyone can do about that. Like I went on the trip, I had a confirmed story. I wrote the story. My editor may have even done some edits on it with me, and then they get let go, and then the story just dies, which is disappointing for everyone. So I think it's impossible to confirm coverage nowadays just because the media landscape is changing so quickly and outlets are going out of business. And, I've heard about horror stories where websites go away forever and then your work is just gone. So that is something else to be afraid of in this fun, ever changing landscape. But I think that having connections is what's the most important. So no matter what, especially as a freelancer, um, just knowing that there's going to be a future for your story somewhere. One of the most challenging stories I've been trying to place lately is um, I went to the what's it called? I have the little ticket with me right now, like here. Um, it was in Del Mar. Maybe you can edit this part out because I'm like, what was it called?
But the thoroughbred
The Breeders' Cup.
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I was like, you live in San Diego, you know what it
Yeah, I
is.
know.
So I went to the Breeders' Cup back last fall, and it was an amazing experience. And I had never had that kind of experience when it came to being at a horse track. It was my first time I had ever been there. And I had a lot of I pitched this story to like 2 dozen outlets. And I had a lot of editors who expressed interest, but it ended up ultimately not placing anywhere because a lot of people were afraid of what would happen if they wrote about animals. Just animals in general are very hard when it comes to like zoos would be another example that I have a hard trouble placing story. Um, and people are concerned about the treatment of the animals at this horse race, which is a bummer because I saw how well they were treated. And then also the venue itself is just so gorgeous. It's a story. But that's another example of how I went on this trip. And I was extremely confident that I could find somewhere to place the story. And it's been 5 months now, 6 months now, and I still haven't been able to place this story. So I want you to know that I am also very disappointed if I go on a trip and I can't find a home for the angle that we have been working with and all these experiences that I had, because that's why I do what I do, is because I want to share these experiences with people and I want to let them know how they can also enjoy these experiences. So it's frustrating that it's so much out of our control, but it is just a way of this media landscape that we are trying to traverse.
Yeah, 100%. Um, on the same topic, links. Why do you know? Do you know why publications don't always use like a tourism board's link specifically, or why they would maybe go find their own photos or links that they want to use outside of the ones that the PR person gave to the journalist? Like, I know there's a lot going on right now with Google algorithm, search, AI, all of that. So
Yeah.
what do you know about links?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from my experience, it really frustrates me when they take the links out that I put in because there's a reason that I linked to those websites. It's because I thought that that extra information from that link was valuable. I've had editors replace links that I added with affiliate links that help them out in terms of making money, which I understand, because if you have a partnership with Airbnb, for example, then it will get you money to have people clicking on that link. And then that website gets the money, which is how we all get paid that way, because if the website is still surviving, then that's how we tell our stories. But I've also had situations where they insert links in that have nothing to do with what I've written, and they want to drive people from my story to another story on their website, if that makes sense. So that's really frustrating to me because I'm like, I didn't write that, and you're just trying to use my story to get your website additional clicks. And again, that's how they stay alive, is by getting those clicks. But honestly, I don't know why ultimately editors do that. I've never been in an editorial position where I've been told to add a different link than the one that the writer had originally used. But I would say that I empathize with how frustrating it is for you as well. And um, I think that there could definitely be a way that we could do both.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always assume too, you know, if it's a Business Insider article, for instance, and they link in there to something referenced in another Business Insider article, you know, it makes sense. I get it. Yeah, they're trying to keep you on their website. They don't want you to leave it.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be frustrating because that kind of stuff is out of your control too. I've had situations where websites have linked articles within my story that are negative about the destination that I'm writing about. And I'm thinking, why would you have me write this story if you're going to link something that's negative about this same destination within the story? I can't think of a good example right now, but you can probably fill in the blank of what that potentially could look like.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
It's just clicks. It's all about the clicks.
Yes. Gosh, okay. We've covered a lot today, so thank you for all the great advice, insights, experiences, and do's and don'ts. I think to round it out, I would love to know just from you any other things that you want PR people and their clients to know, again, whether it's like these are the things outside of my control, or these are the things that every media person wants you to know on the topic of press trips or getting coverage, like any any other kind of closing thoughts around the whole topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds very simple, but I think oftentimes we get caught up in the bigger picture or the little details and we forget about it. And it's just that we're all humans. And so, despite what business is or isn't, we're all people. So, one example I have of something I really appreciate is I work with one public relations woman who's very mindful to never book me on a crappy flight in a crappy seat. And that sounds really basic, but it can be hard when I know you guys are working with a budget. So if it costs $50 more to get me a seat that is not like in the very back of the airplane in the middle at 4 in the morning, I'm gonna have a better experience if you're treated as a human person. And likewise, it goes both ways. Where if something goes wrong, then I can't expect you to be like the god of travel and just wave your magic wand and fix things. It's you have to be patient with each other, and I think that that's something that I think that we could just all use a little reminder sometimes on both sides.
Yeah, yeah. To your point, it's like putting yourself in the journalist's shoes and thinking like, would I want this seat if I was going on this trip? Or
Yeah,
like, would I want the red eye if I was
yeah,
going from West Coast to the East Coast, you know?
yeah, yeah. It sounds simple, but it's like it shouldn't be too hard. But I think sometimes we get caught up in the details of things, and we're not communicating with each other. And not
Yeah.
like speak out. If you don't let it sit and resent the other person that you're working with, whether you're a public relations person or a journalist. If there's a conflict, I would say like I'd rather have you reach out to me and be like, oh my gosh, I went on this trip recently where luckily I was it was not a huge deal, and I was like good friends with the PR person that organized it. But I checked into the hotel, and the person that owned the hotel, it was like this tiny little inn, so it wasn't like a big corporate chain. The person that checked me into the hotel told the PR person that I never showed up. And I was like, I'm here. Hello, I made it. But I'm glad that the kind of relationships that you have with people and the trust that you build. She wasn't like Molly blew me off. Molly blew off my client. She was like, "Hey Molly, did you end up making it to this inn or not?" And it's just the person had misregistered who I was, and it was just a complete miscommunication.
Yeah, that's funny. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I thank you again so much for your time today. And hopefully, we've all learned a little something about press trips.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just nice to be able. I mean, the reason that we do this is for public relations is like relationships. So it's all about your connections and people remember how you make them feel. So I think that's important to remember sometimes, no matter what your job is.
Yes, 100%. Well, thank you, Molly, and we will chat again soon.
Sounds good.
Until next time.